get the feeling that I'm literally recording these one after the other in preparation for when these videos drop. Maybe it's like the fact that the hair hasn't changed, the jacket's the same. You know, I'm bulk working, or batch working it's called. So yesterday you learned how to sew the plain or open seam. Today it's the turn of the welt seam. I'm Eve, the creative curator, and I'm providing these lessons available for free from my Sewing Skills for Beginners course here on YouTube, because why not? So today, the welt seam. The welt seam is a seam that is primarily used in workwear and outerwear. So you'll see it quite a lot when you're sewing jeans. A lot of those seams will be welt seams, and outerwear garments as well. Those use welt seams. It's quite a strong seam. We use it a lot. Very easy to construct. You can't go wrong with it. You will need to have a sewing machine that enables a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch, and then you're set. You could use an overlocker, but I never do. So we're going to roll with the tutorial, and I will see you tomorrow for the French seam, which is an enclosed seam type. Ooh. Okay, now it's the time to sew a welt seam. You will find a welt seam predominantly used on denim wear and outerwear. It's a relatively strong seam, which is why it's used, but it's not enclosed seam like a flat or French. Not that a French seam is a strong seam, it's more about keeping things tidy. A flat felled seam would be the equivalent, it's enclosed, but I prefer, for denim and outerwear, a welt seam is much more sensible. So what you would do is you would start by finishing off the raw edges of your fabric. We're going to do a zigzag stitch on both raw edges. If you have a serger or overlocker, obviously you can use that to finish your raw edges. Most people won't, which is why I'm showing you this technique. So you can see that both the raw edges have been finished with the zigzag stitch. Now we're going to place them right sides together. We will sew with a 1 centimeter seam allowance to connect the two. Because this fabric is a little bit thicker and heavier in weight, it's denim, I'm using a slightly longer stitch length than I normally would. You can see that we have two finished edges and a 1 centimeter seam allowance. We will now press that seam open to whichever side you want the seam allowance to be, and then we will top stitch along the edge, capturing, so just under 1 centimeter, so that we capture this seam allowance, the two different layers, with attaching it to this stitch line. As I have mentioned before, ideally you are using an iron to press your seam allowances. I'm not, because time. I'm not going the full centimeter. I'm lining up the existing edge, folded edge of that seam with the outer edge of my sewing machine presser foot. This fabric is a bit bulky now because I'm sewing through 3 layers, so just be aware that skipped stitches are a possibility. Okay, you can see this is a finished welt seam. We have the original seam line here. This is the top stitched seam, and on the reverse you can see the zigzag finish for each of the layers. You can just about make it out here, but I've stitched over it. And then of course I've got that line, straight line of stitching, which I did from the right side to secure everything in place. And that is a really good strong seam, perfect for denim wear, perfect for outerwear. Obviously if you have an overlocker or serger, you would want to finish these edges with that, you'll get a better finish. You can see my fabric is just trying to fray a little bit, but only up as far as that zigzag stitch. There we go. So overlocking is better, but if you don't have an overlocker, this will work just as well. And that is your welt seam.